Hello YouTube, this is Mr. Gibson Guy here, and in today's video we're going to be looking at where I got the name Mr. Gibson Guy. The full name is Mr. Gibson Guy 335, and if you are familiar with Gibson guitars, you see a couple of them are on the wall here, and neither one happens to be a 335. Well, when I started out on guitar, first started teaching myself to play when I was in high school, and then after high school I started getting real serious about learning the guitar. And one of the things that I learned about the guitar, I had just been playing a guitar that belonged to one of my little brothers that he never used, and so I used it, but I learned about better quality guitars than these cheap things that your parents get you when you're little kids. And so I got a used Fender Mustang with a case for 90 bucks. And boy, was that a world of difference. But shortly after that, a friend of mine introduced me to his guitar. Only the story gets repeated. It turns out to have been his and his brother's guitar. And this guy, I guess because he had an older brother who played, was really up on guitar science and stuff that it was all new to me. I just, it's got 6 strings, it goes like this. But he had a guitar, which, as he pointed out, was the guitar of the stars, he called it. And that was a Gibson Les Paul. Well, this is in the early 70s, so the Les Paul had been run, it had been discontinued. It had been brought back out, and they were starting to appear again, but they were very much in demand and very, very highly priced. So it was very hard to get one because everybody wanted one in those days, and I wanted one too when I had a 335. Anyway, so let's kind of skip around here. I worked the first summer after college and saved up all my money, and I bought the 335. Rushed back to find my friend there in Gainesville and show him the guitar so we could swap. I couldn't wait to get my Les Paul. And he says, "Oh, that's real nice, but my brother says I can't do it. We're going to keep the Les Paul, so you got a better guitar anyway." Only I wasn't really thrilled about the guitar. But that might have been good because it didn't get used much. Sat around. And that was my 335, and I had that guitar for another 30 years, or more, 40 years, yeah. I had it for a long, long time. And finally, after I had been a teacher for 23 years, I retired from that, and I went to working at a music store. And why do you think I went there? Because I wanted to get a Les Paul. That was it. And I came in the first day and interviewed, and then I went and I looked at their guitar wall and I picked out all the Les Pauls, and wow, this is like heaven. This is such an amazing place. This is going to be the greatest place in the world to work. And that's how it feels for the first couple of weeks. And then pretty soon everything starts looking like the same old thing. But I had mentioned it to some of my coworkers. And eventually one of them, Hector, came up to me and says, "Hey Rick, aren't you looking for a Les Paul?" And I said, "Well," I come to think of it, yeah, I am. Haven't looked around in a while. I kind of got used to them. He says, "Well, we just took a couple in on trade and a couple of studios. And you might want to take a look at these because they're pretty nice." And I said, "Well, I don't really want a studio." And he says, "Well, and he gave me the whole sales pitch on it. He says, "Gibson came out with a studio so people who play guitar at night would have something to take out besides their $2,500 Les Paul Standard that you'd ever want to take to a club anyway. So the studio gives you a Les Paul that you can take and play every night, go to rehearsal, and if you bang it up a little bit, it's not any big deal." And I said, "Well, that that's a different way of thinking about it. I hadn't really considered why. I just wanted a Les Paul. So, well, they're over here, come take a look at them. And they had two of these wine red Les Pauls. One of them had chrome hardware on it, and it was pretty new, looked almost like a brand new one. And the other one had gold hardware on it, and it had seen better days. A lot of the plastic around the pickups and pickguard and stuff were cracked or broken off, and was missing a speed knob on it. And so I looked at one, and one was just like a couple of years old, and this one was, this was in, so it was like 13, 14 years old or something like that. It's from 1990, and this is happening about 2004, I think. And I did get it, but I want to take a look here because I started out very against the idea of a Les Paul Studio because it just doesn't quite seem like a Les Paul. And then what Hector said got me kind of thinking about it, and then I went and I took a look at it, and I compared the two of them side by side. And they look kind of familiar, except this one had broken plastic and pickguard was black and loose on it. I've obviously replaced it, but what I did was, you see the side here? I put one guitar up against the other right here, and this newer one, not this is the old one, the new one was just a little bit thinner in the whole body, just a little bit. And then I tried regular standard that was on the wall against this one, and they were the same thickness. So this was the same thickness there. And let me tell you what, we're going to go through all the details on the Les Paul. See if I can get these in no particular order. Les Paul Studio model has what they call mini trapezoids. This is a geometric figure. These fret markers are a trapezoid. They're parallel this way, but they converge this way. So that makes them a trapezoid. And normally on a Studio, these are going to be small, real thin little things here. But these are full-size trapezoids, just the same as on my 61 SG over here. Also, because this is 1990, the first Studio came out in 1989. That's when it was introduced. So this is one of the original productions here, 1990. These have abalone inserts for the inlays. Later Studios have perloid, which is kind of a mayonnaise-looking goop that they put in the hole, and then they sand it down, and it goes like this. But it doesn't have any of the, it doesn't affect sound at all, but it doesn't have any of the brilliant colors and depth that these do. I don't know if you're getting this all here, but it's really beautiful to see abalone. It's made out of seashells. And so these have full-size abalone trapezoids. The newer Les Paul Studios has perloid goop that is imitation abalone. The Studio Les Paul has a Gibson headstock that's there with a decal. The upper level Gibson Les Pauls will say Gibson in abalone. It's all cut out and put in there. And then this one is different, except for the Les Paul Custom. Most of the Studios, the Classics, and the Standards have a Les Paul model signature decal. I think that's coming through. Can't tell from my monitor, but I think you can read it. Les Paul here. And that's a decal on all of them. They don't do that in perloid. This one also has tuners from a Les Paul Custom, which are much more expensive. The regular Gibson tuners are the green key. I better show you that so we can see. the successor to the original Les Paul when it was discontinued in 1961 was a Les Paul that looked like this, little pickguard and an SG body. They had only seen that previously in a couple of Les Paul Juniors and some of the early flat top ones. Now here you see we have Gibson in abalone inlaid there on the top of the headstock, and this is incorrect. For 61 it would still have the Les Paul decal that went on the Les Pauls, and this in 1961 this was a replacement to the old heavy Les Pauls, but this has a crown headstock which came along after they unnamed this the Les Paul and renamed it the SG. These are abalone, but they don't look very great. They're not as nice looking and as colorful as the other ones. Let's see. Oh, SG, very thin body. Now, so far, that's been just kind of adornment stuff that they put on it. This one here, you can see I have different color plastic parts on it. This is, I think this is Gibson. These are all parts. This one, I don't know where, that's some company. And it had a black switch cover. I placed it with a parchment there. And this came with the gold hardware. Oh, I was going to show you the tuning keys. You saw these. That's for the Les Paul Custom. I'll put this over here. Here, I meant to mention this part. These are what we call green key tuners, like this. These are the Clusons, and these were standard on all Les Pauls and on Les Paul Studios. The ones that you saw on my studio is the standard for the Les Paul Custom. There was something else I forgot about that. No. So they're supposed to be the little plastic green key ones, but these are all metal, gold-plated ones, and all gold hardware. And I replaced the black speed knobs with these copper or gold top hats. So all of the general color of the accessories on this one are all matching or slightly not matching. I just wanted to have kind of a grungy look like that, although it's really nice shape from this guitar. And I polished it up really well, so it's really nice. But let me show you something else here. I'm going to use this Telecaster for example. This is a modern day Telecaster, but it's put together and set up just like the early original Telecasters or broadcasters and no-casters and everything. And it's made out of, the body is made out of ash. I'm showing you so you can see the grain in the wood. Now you turn it over, you can see grain in the wood here too. You see the grain on both sides. It's not real prevalent, but anytime you have a translucent finish on a Fender guitar, you're going to want to have it made out of ash because you can see the grain. Ash is a premium wood and it's expensive, but oftentimes Fender doesn't use ash. They did in the 50s, but then they started to change over and they started to use alder. This is a wood which is very similar to ash, and as you can see, there's no grain you can see because this is not a translucent finish. This guitar is painted. It's painted red, if you couldn't tell, and it's made out of alder. It's a little tiny bit lighter than ash, but it's supposed to have similar sound characteristics. But Fender still considers the ash to be their premium wood and the alder to be less expensive. Like if you pick an American Strat and you want one that's sunburst it's going to cost you a little bit more than the American Strat in red. Anyone that's painted black or painted red or painted green or whatever, if it's a translucent finish like that was on the Telecaster, then you can see the grain through it. So they have to use ash for that. So they charge more for that. So if you're getting a painted guitar, you're likely getting an alder guitar, not an ash guitar. Now on Gibsons, it's the same story, except instead of ash or alder, Gibson uses just alder or maple. Fender uses maple for the neck. It's a very hard, very expensive wood, and they use it for their neck. Well, Gibson uses mahogany, which is a little bit softer wood and less expensive, but still it's in need all the time. They're really short of it. But if it's mahogany, let's take a look here. This will be just like the SG. See all the grain pattern in there in the wood? Even though this autofocus on this camera can't quite match up to it, I think you can see some of the stuff, but you can see the grain. This is the back of the guitar. So this Les Paul is mahogany back, and the cap on the front is not alder, it's maple. And you can see this is not quarter sawn, so it's not really beautiful maple, but you can see there's lots of grain in that, especially since I opened that window and let some more light in. Yeah, you can see the grain really well, so you know it's not alder. If that top was alder and it was translucent, this guitar would look like it's made out of plastic. Gibson and Epiphone makes their big guitars with maple. This is maple ply here. Let's turn it over. Yeah, lots of grain in this wood. You can see that plainly. No denying the grain there. So maple has grain, ash has grain, and maple and ash has grain, and mahogany has grain. But alder is for painted guitars because you don't ever see any grain if the guitar is painted. Now, almost finished here. Another thing that the studio does not have is binding. Binding is the plastic that goes around here on the front and up the side of the neck and down the other side of the neck. I can show you on the 175. Oh yeah, this one is double bound. See the binding on the back right here? See the binding on the front right here? See that? It has front binding and back binding. You can see them there. And it has neck binding. See the binding on the neck? Let's see. There, see that? Right there, that's all binding. This binding comes around here, goes down here, goes around here, goes all over the place. Double binding. You find double binding on Les Paul Customs. Regular Les Pauls only have binding on the neck and front binding, no back binding. That's what makes a custom a custom. Now the last thing I'm going to point out, I think I got to everything else, is back here where we can see some, the sun's going behind a cloud, I'm losing some of my light, but we can see some grain here. I have carefully looked through this grain close up under good light, and I have found there is no seam. What that means is the back, the mahogany back on this guitar here is all one piece of maple. That is never the case with a Les Paul Studio. That is something that you don't see much in a Les Paul Classic. You have to get up to a Les Paul standard level or a custom shop nowadays to find a Les Paul that is going to be a one-piece mahogany back. That's very unusual. And so, of course, that's a very desirable feature on it. Most of the studios have an alder top. That's this part, top, the front of the guitar. An alder top, but only the high-end ones have a maple top. And as we saw, with all the grain you can see in there, this top is not alder, it's a maple top. This back is solid mahogany, one piece, not a number of pieces laminated together. Every other studio is going to have laminated back. It's going to be 2 or 3 or 5 or 6 different pieces of wood all glued together to make the back of it. And guess what? A single piece is very rare, but it's worth a whole lot more. So as a result, this guitar, oh, that's right, and there's one more part I think that I didn't mention. Normally, the fretboard, the fingerboard, is going to be rosewood, and on the studios it's a very light rosewood, kind of pale looking, and unfortunate because they just don't have enough rosewood to go around, and it's not aged enough to get dark. They just kind of try to make it, bleach it dark or dye it dark a little bit before they put it on the guitar and slap it on it and sell it. But this one has an ebony fingerboard. You can see it's really dark and very shiny. Ebony doesn't show grain at all either, kind of like alder, but the ebony fingerboards usually you see only on the Les Paul Custom, which is a very expensive custom shop guitar. You never see an ebony fingerboard on a studio. So the whole idea behind this video is to point out all of the non-standard features of my Les Paul studio and why I think my Les Paul studio is the best guitar, best Les Paul guitar that there is, because it's got all these fancy things on it which are big upgrades to the real bass level guitar. It's like it skips all of those except for the binding, and I don't care about the binding. Binding can fall off. I'd rather just have it like this anyway. After I got used to it, at first I used to miss this, having the stripe down here. And I used to ask the guys in repair if they could put binding on it. And I said, "No, dude, don't mess up a good guitar. Why would you do that? You don't want to do it." So I've come to grips with the fact that it's not going to have binding, but I'm going to have a guitar which is not as flashy and is not going to get quite so much attention, and people that might say that would be something good to walk away with. But I got this guitar, and I really like the price on it, and I got one other thing too that goes with it. All I got was the guitar. I had to replace some of the parts, but at the store, back on the shelf in the stock room where we kept stuff, is where we stored cases. And we had a case that went to some guitar that had been sold sometime previously. Nobody knows when, but when I was there, this guitar case kind of stood out, because instead of being black, it's brown. And these Gibson USA cases had been discontinued for a number of years, and we still had it sitting there. So obviously somebody sold a used guitar and they never gave them the case that went with it. So this sat around for years, and there's a problem with this case. That is that it's got a lock on it, and it was locked. But there's two little Phillips head screws right here. And so I undid those screws, and this thing pops back like that. It's still locked on here, but this unattaches the lid. So I can put the guitar in it, but it's got this thing sticking out over here. So I took it and showed it to Jeff, who's one of our assistant managers, on a Sunday. And I said, "Hey Jeff, we've had this case for years and it's not on inventory. It's got this messed up lock on it, but if I undo these screws, I can open it and I could use it. So how much do we want to sell this for?" He says, "So it's not on inventory. It's used item. I don't know how I could ever find it. I would have to make up a SKU for it. Why don't you just take it? We've had it for years. Obviously nobody's coming back for it." So I took it, and guess what? It's a Les Paul case. It's kind of a custom Les Paul case, but I put the guitar in it and it fit. And then a few days later I brought it to work and we had a kind of a slow time. So I tried doing 001, 002, 003, 004, and I got up to 666 and it opened. So I put the two screws back in it, and that's been my case ever since. So I got this really nice Gibson USA case, and that is how I carry my Les Paul Studio around. And it's a really cool case. The idea of having an unobtrusive guitar that nobody wants to steal, this kind of betrays you because everybody notices this case here right away. That's got to have something really expensive in it. Whoa, it's a studio. Anyway, so that's my story on my lifelong effort to have a Les Paul and to finally have one. And I've had it now for, I guess, 15 years or something like that. Yeah, it's a 1990, so it's 34 years old. Been around a while. But it's a beautiful guitar. Plays great, sounds like a Les Paul, because that's what it is. So, if you enjoyed this and you have a comment about your Les Paul or your guitar or what you'd like to get, put it down below in the comments. I'm glad to hear from anybody. Give us a like if you enjoyed this. Thanks for staying with it to the very end. And until the next time, this is Mr. Gibson Les Paul Guy, and I'm out of here.